featured speakers. Rick, you already kind of know, he's one of our members here at Salt Lake Oasis, and he's also our CKO, which is our Chief Karaoke Officer. He may not know that, but the board vote is in, and that's his position. He was raised in Cottonwood Heights, and he is an optometrist. He grew a successful multi-office practice called Eye Care Utah. While in an LDS church leadership position, he had a faith crisis. This confusion and discouragement contributed to him getting addicted to pain medication. His recovery from drugs and Mormonism simultaneously caused a dramatic shift in his life. He became a drug and alcohol counselor and worked at a few treatment centers in Utah for a few years. He's now back working as an optometrist and is married to the beautiful Cheryl sitting next to him. And between them, they have 7 children and 8 grandchildren. So that's Rick. And then Mark Morgan is the program director of Discovery House, Salt Lake City. Discovery House is one of Utah's largest opiate outpatient addiction treatment programs. And Mark maintains his licensure as an advanced substance use disorder counselor. That's a mouthful. And he also serves as treasurer of the Utah Association for the Treatment of Opioid Dependence, another mouthful. And he is a proud alumnus of drug court with 15 years of recovery. As he says, recovery is part of my daily life. He also has a background in marketing and sales, and it is this previous experience that leads him to provide incredible customer service and patient care. Mark and Rick will be speaking to us for around 25 minutes, and then you'll have a chance to ask them any questions that you have during the Q&A afterwards. So please welcome Rick Robison and Mark Morgan.
Bags under my eyes and the hoarse voice. I didn't get to bed in time last night.
But for just cause.
For just cause. That was fun. I had such a good time. It's kind of a crazy thing for those that weren't there. There's an energy with karaoke that's really fun to me. It's you get people that like to sing, you get people that like to dance, and you get people that make fun of us that sing and dance. All three really like that. We had some great singers and just had a good time, so thanks for coming and supporting us. Okay, Mark. Mark's going to sit here for a minute because I'm going to take the first time, and then he'll give his, and then we'll do some question and answer. So we'll try to keep it as concise as possible. So a few weeks back, I gave my personal moment, and Angie talked a little bit about it. Just, I'm sure I said this. So, I went through the faith crisis at the same time. I was injured, and elbow, and actually a friend of ours, both of ours, he's my sports medicine doctor. He treated me for tendonitis and some issues, and then prescribed some medication that I found with the first dose that I took, that it was extremely alleviating of my emotional pain. Physical pain, yes, but the emotional pain. I could sleep, I could relax, and of course as a Mormon I wasn't drinking, so couldn't do that. So it was kind of an instant love affair. And obviously, after so long, when you take pain medication, it becomes a physical dependence as well. So it's not just the emotional, but certainly the emotional is what started it for me. I went through a lot at the time, lost my license for a time, and then, subsequently that created, the windfall of problems after that, like bankruptcy and criminal convictions, and once you have those criminal convictions, it becomes difficult to get jobs as well. But found some real pleasure in being a drug and alcohol counselor. Worked at a few rehab centers, and my last one was with Mark over at Discovery House. And Mark's brother and I were kind of quasi-mission companions, so I got to know Mark through that. And so it's kind of interesting. So then, Mark and I both ended up with this condition and ended up in rehabs and kind of reconnected through that. So kind of a small world around here. So I've been free from my addiction for over 15 years. I'm sorry I'm going to read some of this because I want to get through all these points, so I'll try to look up what I can. I'm one of the fortunate ones that was able to find great support and help before I stuck a heroin needle in my arm. Others are not so fortunate. A few days ago was International Overdose Awareness Day. In Utah, overdose deaths exceed all other injury deaths, including from auto accidents and firearm deaths combined. More than 10 people die each week from overdoses. Utah recently ranked 4th in the country in overdose deaths, and 1st in the country for veterans. The overdose death rate increased 400% from 2000 to 2010, and are increasing at a faster rate since then. Why, and what can we do about it? Is there a pattern with other problems that seems to be increasing? How about other addictions? Pornography, if you want to call that an addiction. Certainly our legislature thinks that's the worst thing going on. We've declared a public health crisis, but we won't really talk about the drug problem, I guess. How about the connection to our high youth rate of suicides? Oh yeah, that's because of the increasing altitude. Everybody knows we're getting higher every day. So, let's just start with what addiction is and what it is not. There's a lot of definitions. You deal with definitions. And there's always a little debate about whether it's a disease or not. Or, there's all these labels and all these discussions. So I found a quote that I thought worked best. There are others that are similar to this, but addiction is a medical condition that is characterized by compulsive engagement in rewarding stimuli despite adverse consequences. It can be thought of as a disease or biological process leading to such behaviors. Recent neuroscience is showing that all chemical addictions start with the neurotransmitter dopamine as it flows to the frontal cortex to give pleasure. However, over repeated use, the normal process of glutamine to give the person awareness of the consequences of drug use becomes faulty. Dopamine is not broken down appropriately in the addict. So normally, dopamine flows from the midbrain to the frontal cortex. We experience pleasure, and then it's broken down and counteracted with glutamine in most cases, which, when you think about, well, I'm going to go drive this car when I'm drunk, for the addict and alcoholic, look at that and say, well, I can do it. I'm sure I'm okay. Where a normal person says, I can't do this, give the keys to somebody else. So that's kind of what characterizes the addict over somebody more normal. Okay. So this is called hypofrontality, and it creates what addicts know as cravings. Of course, we all have cravings as it relates to things, foods, behaviors we naturally like. But an addict's cravings lead to an intense emotional, obsessional experience. The addict wants to think about other things, but the brain is constantly bringing them back to their drug. They can't sleep, pulse is 120, and nothing is of interest to them like getting just one more fix. This intense craving is what most addiction experts consider the process that overrides the choice argument, where the normal person easily makes the correct choice to stop when consequences are clear. The addict does not. The addict is scheming on how to get the drug or the drink without dramatically hurting themselves. And they often know that they cannot recover from their addiction without help. But how do they get predisposed to activate the addiction? There are likely genetics and other physiological factors involved, but there is definitely a mental, emotional aspect that is huge. A question we all need to ask is addiction a primary disease, or is it a symptom of a deeper mental health issue? I'd like to tell 2 stories that illustrates this. This was an experiment from back in 1978, where a group of researchers built a rat park. This is on rats, of course. And basically in the rat park, they took the rats to begin with, They had a water feeder and a morphine feeder. And when they were enclosed in a very tight environment for 57 days, I believe, they mostly took the morphine. The same rats, when they were put over into a rat park, which was 200 times larger with plenty of things for the rats to do, showed that over the first couple of days they kind of weaned themselves off the morphine and started drinking the water. Second thing I want to talk about is, well, let me read a little bit more about this one. Alexander was the psychologist. His hypothesis was that drugs do not cause addiction, and that the apparent addiction to opiate drugs commonly observed in laboratory rats exposed to it is attributable to their living conditions, and not to any addictive property of the drug itself. He told the Canadian Senate a couple of years ago that prior experiments in which laboratory rats were kept isolated in cramped metal cages tethered to a self-injection apparatus showed only severely distressed animals, like severely distressed people, will relieve their stress pharmacologically if they can. So, second thing I want to talk about is when I worked in a wilderness program down in Wayne County called Passages to Recovery. One of the therapists there, when we were reuniting the clients to their families as we were going through a discussion, mentioned that in his university there was his professor wanted to do a study to see if you could change the monkeys, certain monkeys' behaviors, and reshape them to not crave bananas. And so they had a grant to do this, worked on it with grad students for about a year, and other behavior kind of techniques to change the behavior. And of course, through the end of the year, when given the chance, they would still have bananas. They'd still go to bananas. He invited a fellow professor to come help, who took the weekend and then asked everybody to come in and says, "I've solved the problem. I know what it is. I know how we do this." And he showed the monkeys into the area. Of course, they knew where the bananas were, what door was behind. They didn't go to the bananas. They kept going around someplace else. And they didn't know where that was. They found a door, they opened it, and there were grapes. They went for the grapes. So his theory, and the message there, is that an addict needs to find his grapes. So the last issue I want to specifically talk about is codependency. It's a nice term. People define it different ways. It's commonly seen in cases of addiction as the partner or parent tries to fix the addict. The addict feels the controlling energy of the fixer and is often triggered to crave more of their drug. Codependency itself is considered an addiction, in that the person is obsessed with controlling the addict, and it consumes them. One way to define this is where the happiness or well-being of a person depends on the behavior of another. Very common in religious culture. So, wrapping this part up, what we need to see is what causes addiction, how we prevent it in the first place, and how we can help those in the depths of the disease. Many current approaches, which are evolving a bit from the traditional 12-step models, are seeing that it requires healthy connections. When a person feels valid and hopeful in their life, they are less likely to obsessively imbibe in substances and behaviors designed to escape their reality. Let me read that one more time. When a person feels valid and hopeful in their life, they are less likely to obsessively imbibe in substances and behaviors designed to escape their reality. I think we can see how much of the local culture contributes to this, as there is much in religion that specifies what and how a person should look and behave, and eat, drink. In my opinion, this is the elephant in the room as it relates to LGBT suicides, drug overdoses, and the extreme depression that we have here. When a person or organization is telling others how they should think, behave, eat, and love others, Is there any question why we have an increase in these fatalities? My hope is that we can learn to accept, appreciate, and celebrate the beauties of human diversity and our differences. It is only then that we will turn the corner on this devastating disease.
I think I've known Rick for about probably 40 years. Got to know of him when I was about age 16. Heard about his Berkeley experience. Followed his life. Sat in his chair. Some of you have probably sat in his chair, and it's not just an eye appointment. It's an education process. As you can tell, he's very logical. He's very reason-oriented. He explains why you have astigmatism. And Mark, there is hope. We can get you out of those glasses into toric lenses. So I appreciate his path. And I also know that he was a great counselor when he worked for us because he had a good connection with his clients. He was personable, non-judgmental, and he listened. And then he explained, and he educated. And I think the thing I would like to impress upon us today is the importance of education and also believing in people as opposed to beliefs, as was stated earlier. I think that we live in an environment here that is just this incubator that is primed for guilt and shame. And they say the most dangerous time of using in your disease of addiction is not when you're using, it's in between you're using. It's the shame and the guilt. It's our mental focus. And I can attest, there's toxic shame. There's lots of gifted folks that have come before us. Bradshaw's fabulous, that talks about toxic shame and how we can put it into perspective. There's an author named Brene Brown who does a fabulous piece of work on blame and vulnerability. And so today, my approach with addiction isn't necessarily just the science. It's providing resources to families that need it, because I really believe it's a family disease. They say nationally it affects 7 people in an addict's life. In Utah, I think it's about 14 because of our family size. Okay. And it's a ripple effect. And so when we approach addiction, we want to approach the family. We want to approach kind of what Rick shared about, some of those nuances with the culture. And it's not uncommon for a family to come to us and say, we'll be back in 30 days, here, take him, take her. And it's just not that simple. We have some wonderful drugs today. We have some wonderful ways to treat addiction. We have a heroin epidemic right now that is no different than outside the state of Utah. But as Rick stated, we're 4th in the country for pain pill prescription deaths. We have a dangerous drug that has its use and purpose called fentanyl that is now wandering into the state, and it's being laced with heroin, and it's being stamped into pills that you would think as a consumer are normal pain management pills. And it's killing our kids, it's killing our population. The cartel is alive and well. They're a Fortune 500 company. They know that if you can be prescribed for just 6 to 8 months that OxyContin, that they're going to have you sooner or later. Because the OxyContin is not here to poke, or point fingers at any drug companies, but the potency of OxyContin today is so much different than what we had 20 years ago. When I was in the 70s in high school, no one was dying of their drinking. No one died of kegger beer, We just smoked too much bud. drank too much beer and he passed out. And no one was dying of overdoses. Heroin was a dirty drug back in those days. The heroin today is a much different drug. It's very pure, it's potent, and it's just coming in droves. And so, as a community, and this is a community, I think that education is the key. I think the reaching out and getting involved, taking action is the key. We have Recovery Day coming up September 10th, and it's at the Gallivan Center. And it's an opportunity for anyone that has questions to come in and get familiar with the different modalities of treatment. It's not up to me to say that it's a disease or it's all about your choices. It's up to you. It's up to me to present the data, and there's a lot of data. And then it's up to you to make some decisions. But above all, reach out and ask questions and grab your neighbor and ask about outcomes and scientific research and best practice. Those are really important when you're checking into a recovery community. Myself, I thought that one stint at a well-known inpatient center would be it for me. And little did I know, it took 3.5 to 4 years of struggles, pain, family education, religious guilt, shame, you name it. I had to cope with finally finding out what it takes to recover. And today, as clinicians, we don't want you to hit rock bottom. We don't want your sons or daughters to hit rock bottom. We want to raise the bottom. We want to get you involved early on and let you know that there's hope, that there's options today. And I always invite people to the Sugar House Discovery House. If you're in town and you want to stop by and get a cup of coffee and you have a friend or a relative that's struggling, or if it's yourself, there's no questions asked. It's a sacred, safe, private place. There are no dumb questions. And with that, I just want to open it up for some questions. And also invite any of you, if you have a need to talk. Obviously, my friend Rick is a good conduit, and I'm available. I'm on call 24/7, and I'm in a real rewarding area of change right now for the human population. I'm proud to do what I do. Thank you.
How's our time, ladies?
We're good.
We're-
15 minutes if we need, if you want.
Oh, wow, okay. I'll get Ben in just 1 second, if that's okay. One thing I think that I left out and Mark touched on is every addict is different. Every alcoholic, an addict, what is going to work for one may not work for somebody else. We can't homogenize the whole addiction the rehab process, because some people do much better with one form, and some people do better with another. The one thing I think is kind of clear through this is whatever the system they go into, whether it isn't just a straight 12-step program or a rehab and aftercare and everything, what is important is the connection, the relationships. That person needs to have support. They need to have friends that literally love them unconditionally. And that's not easy to do. It's not easy to do when that person may be in and out of jail because they keep relapsing. It's difficult. My youngest full brother has dealt with meth addiction for decades, and he's been in and out of jail, and he has a daughter. And she just turned 21 just last week, 2 weeks ago. And it's been really challenging for her because he gets out of jail, he's with her for a while, and wants to be in her life, and then all of a sudden he's back in jail for another year. And it's been so, I've just watched her grow up, and it's been so difficult for her to find that attachment to him. And it's hard for him because he feels so guilty that he hasn't been there. It's just a vicious cycle. And it's not easy to do, but boy, it's only when you have somebody that is willing to take that risk and love you, and for you to love them, if we're talking about somebody else, no matter what happens. And that doesn't mean you need to enable them. You're not going to say, I'm going to let you, you can go out and go down and depart and do whatever you need to do. I mean, I'm just saying that we can't jump into somebody else's skin and do recovery for them. They're going to have to do it themselves. But you can certainly be there, let them know that you love them no matter what. And just them knowing that, and if they get enough of that support, it's going to motivate them. It's going to give them the hope that they'll do what's necessary to get recovered. Ben? Sorry. And thanks for singing last night, Ben.
Well, it's quite sure how to phrase my question, but so it seems like since maybe the 20s, there was this basic model of recovery. You did 30 days somewhere, and then you went to a meeting every day for the rest of your life. And then that was a model that worked for a lot of people that hadn't really been, I don't think, validated testing versus other methods. Now we're starting to get medications, things like that. What do you see as sort of the state-of-the-art treatment?
Well, when I went through treatment, it was the 28-day model, the spin cycle, medical detox, the graduation coin. There's no graduation, by the way. This is a lifetime deal. We're no different than diabetics, asthmatics, hypertensive. We have to look at the disease of addiction, if you believe that, as a way of treating it daily for the moment. And we have to take action. We have to do certain things to treat that disease. Today, what we've found, especially with opioid addiction and dependency, is the brain takes a long time to heal and recover. 28 days is a springboard. However, because of our wonderful insurance industry and the politics of managed care, not even available for the masses. Maybe the top 5% can afford addiction, treatment and recovery. They've done a lot of studies on a longer continuum of care over the course of the year. Rick mentioned methamphetamine, and we know that the methamphetamine does such a number on our brain with the neurochemicals that we have to give the brain at least a year to stabilize and to decide what we need to do to treat it. Because it's not just the dopamine, it's the GABA, norepinephrine, serotonin levels. Some of it can be addressed holistically. Drug companies don't like that. But some of it can be addressed through what they call a matrix model. And it's eating on a regular basis, and it's learning coping skills. And the biggest culprit, they say 90% of opiate addicts relapse within a year. And that doesn't matter if you went to the Cirque Lodge, the rich and famous, or Volunteers of America Adult Detox, just up the street. I worked in the VOA industry, and what a hellacious experience just spending a night there. I think if we could throw an 18-year-old there for just a night, it would wake them up to the realities of where this disease is going to take us physically. But I think it's the longer continuum of care that's working. We have some amazing drugs on the horizon today that are helping with brain chemistry. However, we know that when we give a certain segment of that population the drug without treatment or counseling or activity, there's failure. So it's finding that happy medium and doing something different. Whether it's rational recovery, whether it's 12-step oriented, whether it's volunteerism, it's something that we haven't been doing. That has to be emphasized. Because what's been used is not working anymore. So there's a whole host of wonderful drugs, but you got to couple it with the right therapy.
Yes?
Do you think medical marijuana would be helpful or harmful?
So a lot of debate on medical marijuana. Believe it or not, in my center, I would much rather have someone on medical marijuana than struggling with a benzodiazepine addiction. Benzodiazepines are a wonderful drug in a certain segment of the population. However, in an addictive population, they're not managed. And so marijuana has the ability to calm someone down, take that anxiety that is just natural when you're, when you're struggling with an opioid addiction, you're on a roller coaster ride. The half-life of the drug itself comes into play. You think you're going nuts with anxiety, but it's very real and physical anxiety. So we have to treat that somehow. And, with the 90% failure rate after a year, the goal is to learn how to manage cravings. Rick talks a little about cravings. We have a famous term called post-acute withdrawal syndrome, PAWS, and it's available to any addict in recovery. It's not just exclusive to opiates, but it's very pronounced in opioid dependency. And the other thing I want to emphasize is about 60% of our population are good citizens that had an injury, that got put on pain meds, and the potency of those pain meds addicted them. And sometimes the doctors are not as educated as you would hope about addiction medicine, and they cut them off. And therefore, there's a need for us to educate and work with the body on how to alter those levels so that they can be altered.
Two questions. The first one is, why heroin right now? Does that have to do with like a crackdown on alcohol, or is it just bad? And the second one is, what are the signs and symptoms of someone possibly being
You bet.
don't know?
So the question is heroin versus oxy. You can talk to a whole host of people. It's $1 a milligram on the streets, Oxycontin. The average person that's hooked on oxy is hooked for about 6 months to a year, and they develop about a $250 to $300 a day habit. Heroin can be economical. It's there. You can get a balloon for $10 to $15. They can deliver to you. They do. They're an organized pizza delivery service. It's not at all what you would think today. It's not just happening on the west side by the dumpster. These are very sophisticated businessmen, along with illegal immigrants that unfortunately are being used to profit. I know that having befriended the Taylorsville detectives on Redwood Road, they distribute about 5,000 balloons a day from 21st South to 9800 South on Redwood Road. And it's rampant, and it happens quick, and there's side streets. It's not in the Walmart parking lot anymore, and it's a very sophisticated business. As far as symptoms to look for, really highs and lows of an individual emotionally. When someone gets hooked on oxy, they're not strung out and nodding off and salivating at that point. They actually have an increased amount of energy. And loved ones often say that they often characterize someone in withdrawal as being high because there's chills, there's sweats, there's cramps, it's hell on earth. It's the flu times 10 when you're in withdrawal. And so if you talk to anyone that's overcome their addiction to opioids, they'll tell you they never want to go back to that last horrible withdrawal cycle. But they tend to be very energetic and yet very volatile emotionally, very irritable. Runny nose comes on, the sweats, the chills, the flu. When you have a coworker that's going on 3 days to go to the bathroom every 10 minutes, it's not the flu. He's getting well. And the average person towards the end of their addiction before they get help is using 8 to 10 times a day. And they do go to the needle very quickly, unfortunately.
The needle ends up being a lot cheaper and quicker for an opiate addict. And as you're coming down with all of those symptoms, your brain knows. I mean, it starts to even experience the drug before you do it. I mean, it's crazy how it works. You anticipate it. And for me, I was, not to get into that, but I would be going to pharmacies. And oftentimes I was out of my pills and I was already into the shakes and everything. And I'd be waiting to get that pill. And just waiting there in the pharmacy shaking, and then when getting it, just going, drinking fountain, just put a few pills in my mouth, and it was like the shakes would be gone right away. And that wasn't as physiological as it was mental for me. And so it's mainly, it usually starts with prescribed pain meds, the appropriate way, and then the dependence goes up. You literally, our body basically is building more neuroreceptors for the opiate and for the dopamine. And so then you have more, so that when they're depleted, is that my grandson? Yeah. And then when it's depleted, there are more of these receptors that are basically screaming to be filled, and then that's telling the body, that puts it into the flu-like symptoms, and it's terrible. So the heroin ends up just being a less costly and a way to go and a quicker fix. Okay.
I have a coworker who just recently sent her son to Arizona to his dad and say nobody can help him because nobody, he was always going to take him. He's 90 years old. And I said, I think someone you want to ask to know you don't. The problem is he doesn't want to help himself. So I just want to know what is considered want to help himself. You mentioned that. What do you consider? What do you consider to want to help himself?
Well, I think we can do a lot more work as professionals than you might, being too close to home, especially a mother or a father, spouse. Even though you can be dead on accurate with them needing help and their denial phase of the addiction, sometimes if you can get them out of that environment into a different environment that's more of an educated environment where there's no dumb questions, they can ask questions, and they can get educated by someone that's objective, that's where we do our best work. We educate a lot of families on naloxone. Naloxone you're going to hear a lot about. It's a life-saving drug that brings someone out of an overdose episode. Non-narcotic, intranasal, or pain management for that matter, should have a kit in their house. And it's just a it saves lives. Gotta remember my community. But anyway, so naloxone, $50 over the counter. You can get them at grocery stores now, readily available, and it just saves lives. That's what they use in emergency rooms to bring someone out of an overdose episode.
One last thing, and then I know we're out of time. Codependency, I touched on that a little bit, and it's really a fine line between being a healthy support system and being codependent. And we can talk maybe, if anybody has that issue, we'll talk after or another time. I'm always happy to help anybody that has that. But, codependency really is where there's too much control, where you're feeling the energy is there that you're forcing them to do it in a certain way. And it is difficult when the recipient of that, helpful energy is just feeling controlled and doesn't like it, and it actually pushes them into more drug use. So it's a real tough issue. There are CODA meetings, where they Codependents Anonymous can get together to learn how to be healthy. So, Angie, thank you. Thanks everybody.